So I just got back from an early screening of Neon's most recent horror comedy set to release in a few weeks called The Monkey. It's directed and written by Osgood Perkins, produced by James Wan, and I believe even Stephen King had a hand in this. So it has an absolutely star-studded cast of horror masters. And if the name Osgood Perkins sounds familiar to you, it should, because he was also the writer and director of Longlegs, the popular movie that came out last year, pretty divisive. And whenever I mention this guy, I like to always point out that his dad was actually Anthony Perkins, the guy from the original Psycho. Fun little trivia nugget for you. But always being honest with you guys, I actually wasn't crazy excited for this film. I saw a mini teaser on it, didn't really know what it was about. So I got into this movie and I was actually pleasantly surprised with how wild and bonkers this movie was. It was nothing like I expected. Because what this movie is actually about, you have two twin brothers, Bill and Hal, who find their father's old monkey toy in the attic, and a series of gruesome deaths start. The siblings decide to throw the toy away. They move on with their lives where the past will eventually catch up with them. And that's kind of the brief overview synopsis of how this movie is described. But what it actually is, it's kind of like a throwback to 90s Stephen King adaptations like Stand By Me, the It miniseries, mixed with Final Destination with this weird monkey toy who's killing everybody off. In the opening scene of this movie, this guy arrives at a store and he's trying to pawn off this weird toy monkey who we don't really know why. The owner of the store does not want it, but in this scene we find out that if you turn the key in the monkey's back, you will raise a drumstick over his head and start banging on his drum like a madman. And at that point, it's oh shit, because somebody's going to die around him in a very funny, creative, gruesome way. It's kind of a blast, to be honest. I think the opening scene of this film really does establish the tone of what this movie wants to be basically perfectly, because it's very dark and dry in humor, and it's also a very dark movie when it comes to the gore, but it also doesn't take itself too seriously, because in that opening scene, there's an absolutely absurd kill. Like almost every kill in this movie has an endless amount of creativity and fun when it comes to the kills. It feels like they tried to kill somebody in just about every way. So after that opening scene, I was kind of sitting there thinking, yeah, this one's probably for me. The movie stars Theo James, who's actually really good in this film, and he kind of has to be because he's doing that thing in modern Hollywood where he's playing two different characters at once. They're like polar opposites of one another. One of these brothers is this dorky, bullied kid who just gets picked on his whole life. Nobody likes him. And then the other brother is this smart ass kid. He's a dick to everybody, very rude. So they're absolute 180s from one another. So the way this movie is going to be told is through the lens of their childhood as they grow up, grow apart, and then eventually come back to one another through the connection of this weird monkey toy. For the most part, I found this movie to be very entertaining and creative and funny at points. I do have major issues with it, as I will get into. But if you're a fan of the Final Destination series, you like Longlegs, you like his filming style, you just like a very dark, dry sense of humor, be on the lookout for this one. As I already said, the best way to describe this film is Final Destination with a very dry and dark sense of humor that's laid on thick. I don't think there's a single scene in this movie that takes itself seriously, and Oz Perkins himself is actually in this movie as a cameo, and he's playing an absolute cartoon. I think a huge part of how much somebody likes this movie is going to depend on how they can deal with that tonal contrast. Extreme gore, extreme creativity and kills, but also an absolutely unserious tone in every other facet. So I'm not going to talk about any spoilers of where this plot ends up going, but a main driving force of the plot is the fact that our main character has a son and he wants to avoid the son dying at the hands of this evil monkey. But I had a huge problem with the fact that this movie is so unserious in nature. It sets the tone so thick so early on that it's just not taking itself seriously. It's very hard to take any of the emotional elements of this film seriously at all. That's actually the major issue I have with this film, because the kills are creative, they're fun, but every time this movie tries to take itself seriously, it tries to have an emotional scene, it just does not pay off because the tone is so established that nobody cares, nobody is serious. People will be having heartfelt conversations and then they'll die in an absolutely asinine way about 30 seconds later. It just can never allow itself to breathe and have an actual moment of authenticity. Again, that's probably what they were going for, but for me personally, it was just too thick. It was too obvious. I wanted a little bit of an escape from the silliness, and it never really has it. Because I thought this movie was kind of a tale of three parts. I thought the first act of this movie was absolutely phenomenal. You get to see this monkey, you're seeing kills rapid fire. I was absolutely engrossed. I thought this was going to be an all-timer for me. But then I thought the middle of this movie kind of reached a lull, because the monkey's kind of in the background. We're starting to meet these characters. The plot is progressing, but the monkey is by far the most interesting part of the film. But with him not in the movie kind of drags a little bit. It starts to get a little bit overly silly. Then the monkey comes back for the third act and we're back to entertainment. But again, not to give anything away, I thought the major reveal of what was going on in this movie, what was the driving force of the movie, what was going on with the monkey, was very, very weak. So the kills can carry the film to a certain extent, but I thought the character development, the plot, the way it progresses, kind of an issue like I have with all of Oz Perkins' works, where it feels like the first two acts kind of make sense, Third act falls off a cliff. This guy would just hire somebody to work on his third acts and his twists or whatever he's going for, the major conclusion. I think this guy could be an all-time director. This is like the second or third movie in a row I've watched where I really liked the first and second act of the movie, and then the third act I thought was in a totally different atmosphere. I didn't really like it at all. When you get to the very final act of this movie, it does try to be serious and heartfelt for a second, but even then it still goes for a bit. And I won't lie, I did laugh and chuckle at it. I did find it effective, but it's kind of silly because it felt like they had to compromise the entire rest of the movie to get to that point. No characters are serious at any point in this film, no matter how serious of a situation they're in, but eventually the bit does pay off. So I guess maybe the third act of this movie depends how much you like the little one-liner bit they're going for. The only thing that kept me from absolutely hating this third act, honestly, is it does know what it is. It's absolutely ridiculous. It's self-aware. It goes for it. It's batshit crazy bonkers at points. So you will definitely have fun with it. I just think it gets a little bit too ridiculous for me, and I think it just kind of gets stupid to a certain point. But I will say this, if you're a fan of the Final Destination movies, you like Oz Perkins' other work, you like the way he films things, you like his sense of humor, be on the lookout for this movie for the most part. I had a really good time with it. I thought it was fun, but I did have my issues with it. I still recommend you check it out in theaters when it comes out. It's a good time. So I hope you guys go out and see this, and if you do go out and see it, come back and let me know what you think in the comments down below. Did you like this movie? Do you think it's better than Longlegs? I definitely think it is. As always, if you haven't subscribed, join me down below. I love talking movies with you, but I will see you in the next review. Peace!